What is going on, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another episode of The Kingdom Says. I am your host, as always, Garrett Williams. We've got a special episode for you today. A little bit of a Kingdom Says, Kingdom Recon crossover episode. We've got Mr. Arrowhead Tom here, co-host of The Kingdom Says and The Kingdom Recon show. Tom, how are we doing tonight? Okay. Tom's muted. Doesn't know how to unmute himself. Okay, we're good.
I'm here. I apologize, my friends. My computer froze just as I could hear you, but my computer froze. I feel like a Chiefs wide receiver, just not ready for the play. Ball hit me right in my hands. So that's how I feel. Or maybe like any member of the Chiefs offense after this week. Listen, the holidays, full swing of things, busiest time of the year, and it's rough out here right now, but you know what? We're going to talk about all that. We're going to get into it. We're going to hopefully sprinkle some seeds of hope. But I'm happy to be here with you guys, and I will try to not talk too much about draft prospects, but no promises.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll definitely see about that. Also, join us, Mr. Randy Ellenberger, co-host of Kingdom Recon as well. How we doing, Randy?
Doing awesome. Just recovering from the festivities of the holidays. I hope everyone else had a Merry Christmas and got some quality family time and get to maybe chill and reset a little bit and flush some bad football memories out of our brains and find a way to right the ship.
Yeah, that would be nice to flush out all those bad memories. But good holiday season. Obviously, it's it's a little tough with the Chiefs just absolutely laying an egg on Christmas Day. But hey, it is what it is. A lot better things to focus on Christmas than what the Chiefs were doing on the field. So that's the biggest theme that we're going to be talking about today. Unfortunately, Kyle cannot join us tonight, but we are wishing him well. Before we get too far into it, though, we do want to say thank you all for tuning in and joining us this season. We really do appreciate the support. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and YouTube, just all the love that you guys have shown us this season. It's definitely been a wild ride so far, and who knows how much further this season will end up going. Obviously, we still got 2 weeks left of the season, so we're not going to completely shift into off-season mode yet, but we will talk about why expectations are pretty low going forward, I think, for the Chiefs, especially what we've seen this entire season, kind of just going back through it and figuring out what went wrong this year. That's it's very surprising, to say the least, even for people who really intently cover the Chiefs like we do. It's like even Christmas, that surprised us. That was even one of a very surprising performance. So yeah, we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about how we got here. We're gonna dive into it. Tom, any first and foremost thoughts of the Chiefs season here?
Yeah, I mean, and we say that because like the kind of the way we're talking about it almost sounds like the season is already over. Obviously, there's football left to play. There's a lot of ball, playoffs, all that stuff. But for most of us, we're kind of seeing the writing on the wall, right? And I think it starts, and I said this, I think I tweeted this during the game. We had a team last year that overachieved, right, in what was supposed to be a, quote, rebuilding year. And they tried to ride the magic again, and it's just not there, right? And I'll say this because I don't want to be too, negative, too, final about it all, because again, we could go on a run. That's all it takes is string together some games. But realistically, I don't think anybody in Chiefs Kingdom is holding their breath. But it's frustrating because if it would be one thing if there were injuries and there were complications and those types of things that happened, but these were the concerns that we had back in training camp, right? These are the concerns we had going into the offseason last year. Are there going to be receivers? How is the offensive line going to hold up? And that's, I think, the receivers get a lot of it, but there's some work to do on this offensive line. We've talked about it every week that he's played Wanya Morris. Like, we're hoping he was going to be the guy, and that'd be a big win for us if he could. And His game against the Raiders was brutal. I was just watching the clip before we started where he's the very last man off to move off the line on the offense or defense, right? So is that young, player stuff? Sure, but you can't have that. But so it goes back to this. The team wanted to double down on a Super Bowl year. They wanted to run it back. There's some logic in that, but they lacked the own self-scouting to go, hey, we need to get better because other teams have gotten better. We need to adapt and change because other teams have adapted and changed. And again, they talk about like the Super Bowl hangover or anything like that. These guys are all professionals. They're working hard. They do their thing, but you could see it with some of these guys that were on this roster last year, especially who I feel have been a little entitled, have thought it was going to come easy, have just, they've done a lot of talking about working harder and that kind of thing, but they haven't. And then you can see the guys who really are working their butts off, but just don't, haven't been in the position to be successful, right? So we got here because we tried to run back, a Super Bowl championship team that overachieved last year. And we're not overachieving this year. It's realistic expectations, for the actual roster at hand. We know who we are now. We'll say it that way.
Yeah. And if anything, I think a lot of these guys that we had a lot of hope for, and that we heard through training camp and the off season that they're working hard, they're taking steps, they're going to progress, they're going to do big things. That they've really just fallen short and actually regressed in production, like overall. I mean, last year towards the end of the season, AFC Championship game, MVS looked great. I was like, all right, sweet. Like maybe some things are finally clicking for him. Like he's gonna turn the corner. He's gonna be productive. He's a ghost. Like, even when he's on the field, he is invisible. Like no one pays attention to him. Pat doesn't pay attention to him anymore. He's not dependable. You can't count on him for anything except for maybe looking over the wrong shoulder, finding the wrong landmark, not catching the football. Heard all offseason long that Sky Moore was looking great. He's shifty. He's creating space. He's looking strong. He's looking fast. Bull. Like, that's not happening. Kadarius Toney's a number one wide receiver. He's got all this ability. Fantastic. All the ability in the world doesn't do anything if you can't, one, stay healthy, two, keep a level head and put it all together and like move forward. Like you keep giving him all these opportunities, to get, because we always hear, once he gets the ball in his hands, he's electric. Well, great. You have to catch the ball first. And then you hear about all these big plays, but that really hasn't produced anything through his career. Like he's got a handful of big plays in his 4-year career now. Like, great.
The lack of development from the wide receiver room,
it's just
definitely a big downfall of this season. And it's so many different things that kind of goes into it. It's the wide receivers coach, obviously we've talked about ad nauseum, just the scheme in general. I think the offensive philosophy early on in the season where they're trying to feed every single person, and didn't really let people get into a rhythm.
This isn't junior high football. Like not everyone gets to play. Put your dudes on the field. And let them build.
I think there's some other. There's other things to consider too, especially with the receiver. Obviously Kadarius Toney was touted as the number one kind of guy going into it, but people kind of forget that like he got hurt literally the first day of training camp, like the first practice. He just misses all of training camp. Like it's just so that obviously plays a big factor. Guys have to learn different roles now. They have to fill in for him to try to make up for that in training camp. And then once you get him back, he's not, he's up and down in health wise. All the guys are kind of up and down health wise. It was just so many different things in the wide receiver room that I think really just kind of broke down the offense this year. And something that at least, last year we didn't really see that much kind of inconsistency with the guys. You had more reliable options like Juju, and MVS, was a decent option still. Just very surprising, definitely, to see how like I said, just how much of a step back that they've taken, and it's gotten worse throughout the entire season. There's not really been much of a righting of the ship. Like this past game versus the Raiders, Pat drops back and it's instantly like, yeah, he there's nobody open. Nobody has a clue what they're doing on every play. It's real bad football. It's real bad football, and like we kind of pointed to earlier, that was the plan going into the offseason. It's just to develop the guys that you already have. You didn't make any big additions really in free agency. You draft a receiver in a second round, which is good. But that was phenomenal. Yeah, and that's worked out great. But it's just you lose a piece in Juju, and you don't really make up for him anywhere. And you also lose McCole Hardman, obviously, who started the season with us or without us. It's just a whole mess of things. And really, I think when you look at the offense's lack of production this year, it starts at the wide receiver room.
Yeah, and I'll be first to admit too, like at the beginning of the season, I had really high hopes for Smith and Taylor playing tackle. A couple of veterans who have had some success in the league and have put good tape out there, and I was like, all right, our three interior dudes are about as solid as you can get as a unit throughout the NFL. And I was like, all right, a couple quality veterans on the outside. Pat's not going to be running for his life all the time. He'll be able to sit and pick guys apart. Well, that hasn't happened. Like Juwan Taylor, he's the most penalized player in the NFL. Yeah. This guy cannot figure out the snap count, jumping early, holding dudes. He's not moving his feet. He's reaching and grabbing, and then Wanye coming in for Smith, he looked great the first couple of games. I should say great. He looked really good. He had moments
for a third round rookie. He looked pretty good. Yeah.
And that's, he was a third round guy. There's some development there that needs to happen, but some of that stuff looked real promising the last couple of games. It was a completely different show last week when you got Max Crosby, lined up across from you, and that dude just doesn't quit. Like there is no quit in Max Crosby. And out of all the Raiders, that is the one dude, even though he's got an attitude problem, he's the one dude that I kind of actually admire on that roster for just being a dog that doesn't quit.
He's a dog.
He's got great talent. He's got great motor. He's a leader, and he's got that mentality that that the Raiders are trying to build around and what the Raiders want. But I was like, man, Pat was trying to scramble as soon as he got the ball because he was fearful that he was going to get hit immediately just because the tackles could not do anything.
He was scrambling for his life out there. It really reminded me of the 2020 Super Bowl versus the Bucks. Like every drop back,
serious flashbacks of that Tampa Bay Super Bowl, and I was
similar deal where it's like no one's, if he does somehow get a pass off, no one's going to catch it.
Can I be a little more critical? So we talked about the tackles. I need to.
Yeah.
Going into this year, I thought there was going to be a tough decision, because the Chiefs are going to have, they both had, Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, same draft class. I don't, if this was the contract year for Trey Smith, I don't know if I offer him another contract, at least not a top end guard. Trey Smith looks like he's gone backwards a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, especially in his pass blocking.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's with, having Taylor next to him and some things have changed. People I think don't always understand how much that, offensive line works as a unit. And just having, some continuance with the guy next to you is pretty big. But man, it just feels like he is getting called for penalties when, the other two guys are, not. And then I've seen him, end up on the ground and he's lunging and just some of the bad habits that, as a prospect, I remember knocking him for. But there's just a lot of areas on this team that make you go, what are we doing? How are we all doing, moving backwards?
I think a big factor, by himself as a pass blocker and whatnot, he has kind of regressed a little bit. I think a lot of it does play into part with who you're playing next to, obviously. Like a lot of what we've been seeing the Chiefs kind of get burned on this year is like stunts and blitz pickups and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's a big factor of having a new guy outside you that's, you're not really working well with on stunts and whatnot. but it's so tough, and
That can be an excuse earlier in the season.
yeah, but
this
it's
is week
continuing.
16.
Yeah, it's very
We're
late
out
in
of
the season.
territory.
Yeah, I think there's still some bright spots. Like I think despite the it was a bad game from everyone. Basically, that's kind of the problem. And it's almost hard to like continue to judge off of one game. Juan Morris looked really good these past couple weeks, and then obviously when the rest of the team kind of gets burnt, he did too. I think that there's still some potential there. Trey Smith, can he get better still? Who knows? Is there more improvement for him there? Is it just a result of the entire offensive line looking bad? It's hard to tell. It's just been a downward spiral for the entire. And like I said, everybody's gotten worse really, and the offensive line has not improved since the season started.
Yeah, and I know we have to have a little bit of grace with Creed and Trey. They're young players. I mean, third season. I mean, for all intents and purposes, like they have really outplayed their tenure. It felt like first couple of years, like we were like, wow, like we have a tandem here that's gonna ride pretty sweet for the next few years. And then, granted, there's going to be some growing pains, but I think I don't know if Trey's trying to maybe try to do too much to try to help cover up Taylor and what he's doing on the other side over there. But I'm like, stuff's not gelling. I mean, and a lot of this, we talked a little bit pre-show too, and how we kind of attack this. Like, this is a top-down issue right now because a lot of these things are coaching, scheme, development, all these things wrapped into one. And it all starts with Veach, and it goes to Coach Reed, and it trickles down to the positional coordinators and positional coaches. And you try to have these conversations with people on Twitter and whatnot about what does a positional coach really do in the NFL. They're supposed to coach. Okay, they're supposed to they're supposed to know what they're doing. They're supposed to make improvements. They're supposed to help these guys stop making the same mistake over and over and over. Like, at some point, you got to take some accountability. And I think that's where the real hard part is like, there's a lot of guys that just aren't stepping up, aren't being accountable, aren't putting in the extra effort, I don't know what they're doing. It's just, it's hard to watch these guys make the same mistakes over and over and over each week. And, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Like, something's got to change, and it has to start from the top and work its way down. Somebody's got to, point a finger and say, hey, you're not doing your job. We need to fix something. And if you can't do it, we're going to find somebody else who will.
Yeah.
Whether that's
and somebody who can.
Whether that's another guy on the roster. Like we talked a little bit pregame or pre-show. I don't care if I ever see MVS on the field again. If he's going to be a complete ghost out there on the field, why can't
running cardio
get a shot? Why can't Washington get out there and try to run somebody off?
Yeah.
MVS doesn't even look like he cares half the time. And the defense doesn't care if he's out there anyway, because they know Pat's not going to throw to him.
Yeah, they're not worried. They're not
worried about that dude at all. So, put a different face out there that's going to try. Give Ross some more snaps. I don't care. Get somebody out there who's going to try and prove themselves.
Yeah.
If the dude out there doesn't look like he cares.
Definitely at this point, just need to shake something up. Like the personnel, some type of personnel has to change, and pretty drastically. Like literally just try anything, because obviously the trend has not been going well. Besides Rice, I mean, they've been giving Rice more snaps, so that's good. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and here's the thing:
MVS had as many snaps as Travis Kelce last week. I'm like, there's no reason for that.
Yeah, and it's hard to make those claims or those demands this late in the season. Like I'll acknowledge that. Andy's not going to be the guy who, I wouldn't hold my breath on all that. But what you're saying makes sense from the, I think the sense of urgency. But it goes back to, I think, maybe probably some arrogance from the team as a whole, from the leadership, from the construction standpoint, because they felt like, hey, we won with these guys last year. And we heard a little bit of this during the speeches and stuff. Oh, this is supposed to be a rebuilding year. And you know what? That there's a part of that that's really great, that I really, like, hell yeah, like, stick it to them, fire it up, us against the world, let's do it. But you've still got to put in the work and do the, the stuff in between there and here to stay competitive, right? And so I go to, we talk about coaching, like, I'm surprised this offensive line has struggled so much just because we have such a good O-line coach in Andy Heck. Right. And so I go, okay, is he thinking about hanging it up? He's been around for a long time. And he's one of Andy's, right-hand guys. Is there something there that's going on? Is it just not clicking? Like, I'm one of the biggest defenders of Jawan Taylor. I was, early and going, hey, he'd be great to bring in. And like, he's got all the tools, but he's not putting it together like we want him to. And that's frustrating. I think that's, you're kind of hoping that a change of scenery for him, makes it so he can put those tools together. You're trusting a guy like, like Andy Heck to be able to get the best out of a player who is as it's similar to Kadarius Toney. Jawan Taylor's as athletically, talented as any tackle, just about any tackle you're going to find in the NFL. But the mental part of it is just not there. The wide receiver room, that's the one that it feels like, they really doubled down on maybe some things that they shouldn't have. They went, you know what, we're all right. And we were not all right. And that's a challenge.
And also, it should also be kind of mentioned too. And if Kyle were here, he would probably definitely mention this. It does help if you could have signed your starting defensive tackle to a deal and not had him hold out and kind of straddle you for money all off season. That would have freed up some more cap space, obviously. Might have changed some things he did in the off season.
That leads us into a whole different conversation too that we were talking, pre-show. It's like, what does the future hold? Like when we talk about, how we right the ship and how we get things back to where we want to be, is like there's some off-season questions, some serious questions that have to be answered, some big decisions to make. And it's hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what to do. But I mean, if you look at, Chris Jones and Snead, you can't sign both of them. And I don't want to get too much into the off-season stuff, at this very step, but like that's a big decision to make. And
the defense, the defense has
Snead, but it's tough.
Yeah, and the defense has played, obviously really well this season. And that's been the highlight of all of it.
The reason we have the record we do this year.
That's the defense gave us 6 points.
Limped.
The offense handed the Raiders 14 points. That's the game.
I've never seen that before. Back-to-back defensive touchdowns. Like I've
seen it on in like Little League. I've seen it in games where high school people get blown out 50-0.
The defense played lights out. They allowed 6 points. How many yards did O'Connell have in the second half passing? Was it less?
He didn't complete a single pass
in the second half.
No, not the second half.
That's unheard of.
After the first quarter.
Yeah,
now
that's unheard of.
The Chiefs' offense was on the field for most of the second quarter because they threw those back-to-back plays. But literally, if the offense had just gone out there and punted the ball every time, after that first touchdown, they would have won the game based on how the defense played. All they had to do was not turn the ball over. And the turnovers. Listen, the fumble. I love the creative Andy Reid stuff, and I will live with the mishaps that come with that. I don't like it that close to the goal line because that defensive tackle
is 10, whatever that was.
So
inside your 15?
Yeah. And then the pick six from Mahomes, that was 100% Texas Tech, but it was also, and this is also where they're not on the same page with the receivers and stuff, because
Watson didn't look back. He was backpedaling.
It was him, but it wasn't even, if I remember right, and I haven't gone back and watched it. We intentionally were trying to avoid getting too much in the Raiders game for the sake of my blood pressure. But there was another guy who drifted over where I think he was not even supposed to be that far over, and his guy was able to peel off. It was a cluster. So part of that was on Mahomes because Mahomes was doing too much. I thought he threw the ball away. I was like, oh, good. Live to fight another down. And then next thing I know, the guy's running back and I'm like, oh. I genuinely thought his his like throw out of bounds got intercepted. But I just
and, like we can't. Yeah, I was gonna say we can't fully disclaim Mahomes of credit. He didn't have a great game, and obviously with all the other factors that's kind of been going on this entire season, he's still putting up real good numbers and whatnot. But I think you'd be the first to admit that he's even not playing his best football this year, and it's just well,
it's hard to do it by yourself. I mean,
yeah, exactly. It's tough when you're the only one out there. That is true. That is true.
It looks like, honestly, I didn't mean to cut you off, Garrett, but that game reminded me so much of some of the Texas Tech games because it would be that, oh God, he's got the ball, he's running for his life, he's throwing incredible plays, and then he's willing the team up and down the field, and then when he did have time, nobody could get open, or he'd take a shot and hit him right in. There was somebody, it hit him in the chest, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
Gray in the back of the end zone.
Yeah, Noah Gray in the chest. Right in the chest.
Thank God.
And they're like, oh, this is a good play by the defender. No, that was a drop.
No.
We continue to drop everything. And so it's like, you don't – here's the reality with that. You don't need to surround him with the all-world talent like he had with Tyreek and all that stuff. You don't. Like, we've seen that necessarily. You got to give him more than what he's got.
Yeah.
And that's where his scales have tipped. It was hubris. It was a little bit of we got Pat, we've got the cheat code, and I think I said this earlier in the season, or maybe it was early in the offseason. I've used this comparison before, and this is what I want to see from Brett Veach. The 2006 New England Patriots. I don't remember who they were playing. I just remember Tom Brady playing a very solid Tom Brady-like game, and they are on the goal line getting ready. And I think it was the divisional round. They need a touchdown to score. Third or fourth down, they throw it's not even a screen pass. They're an I formation. The receiver, Rashay Caldwell's out by himself. The defense forgets to cover him. I'm talking, I could have walked on the field, took the ball, threw it to him, and got the touchdown. And I remember it because Rashay Caldwell, for those of you who've watched football, he is the guy who had the real big eyes. They stuck out of his helmet. And I will never forget it because Tom Brady, sees it, calls it, chucks it over to him. Rashay's on top of it. Boom. Textbook right in the hands, drops the ball. Patriots lose that game. That offseason, they went out and they got Wes Welker, and they went out and they got Randy Moss. And I don't know if Randy Moss is, hanging out in free agency or if he's available or if there's somebody like that. But that's, when you talk about what are you going to do next year, you better – when free agency opens, and I don't mean when it opens, I mean like when the combine happens, Brett Veach and Andy Reid better run into Mike Evans' agent, in Indianapolis, coincidentally, and happened to have dinner with him.
Yeah.
They better call everybody from Denver to.
I would love to see Pittman in Kansas City next year.
Yeah, see who's on the market, see which young receiver, is bitching too much behind the scenes. You call every team in the NFL. You call yourselves and go, who do you got to trade me for wide receiver?
If there's one thing to take from this Chiefs season, and Chiefs fans should almost certainly look forward to, is that they will make some kind of adjustment. Every year we've seen Brett Veach, outside of maybe this year, which was kind of a weird year, but every year we've seen him just absolutely overhaul position, go out and make some kind of big acquisition or something. So I have a lot of hope.
I agree. I just think he's going to have more money than he's normally had. But he's also got some work to do.
He's got some work to do.
Like you said, you're going to replace at least one tackle this offseason, right?
Probably.
You probably, even if miraculously they keep Jones and Snead, they have to add more to that defensive line up front. Those defensive tackles. They're going to have to figure out what to do with their linebackers because Nick Bolton's the only starter who's left under contract next year. So there's like 4 position groups that need, that are going to have turnover at starting snaps. And you got to deal with that in a meaningful way. And then, I hope that when you come, like, what I've seen their approach to be before is they like to use free agency to pick up guys who are kind of value players who can be starters. They take a couple big swings here or there. So hopefully they do that. At least one wide receiver. At least I'd love to see them bring in somebody on defense again. And then you find those role players, and then you head into the draft, and you're able to draft like more based on best player and kind of looking forward. Grab some interior offensive linemen, grab some more defensive tackles, grab some cornerbacks, grab grab at least 2 wide receivers. Then you can. It's a good draft class for a lot of the positions that the Chiefs have needs at.
Sure.
But they've got to be. I can't believe I'm going to say this about Brett Veach. He's going to have to be more aggressive than he normally is, which is usually pretty damn aggressive.
Yep, we're going to have to see some big changes for sure. As far as the rest of this here 2023 Chiefs season, obviously we have the Bengals coming up this Sunday. If the Chiefs win that game, they have clinched the AFC West for what's that, like a 8th, 9th consecutive year in a row? 8 years in a row if they win on Sunday. Secures a playoff spot. Obviously, we're out of 1 seed contention, so there's at least a somewhat decent chance if we win that they might rest some guys week 18. The big story is going to be they just have to do something on offense. They can't be that mistake heavy. They have to get back to some kind of basic fundamental football. The defense, I have no worries about whatsoever. It's all the offense, which is still crazy to say. It's still very wild to say still, but
it's just weird to even have that sentence come out of your mouth with what we.
And it's even there's just been so many times this season where it's like, oh, this is a vintage clutch moment right here from the Chiefs offense we might see, and it's not happening. This is what the Chiefs are. They're gonna have to really grind for a win versus Cincinnati. So we're gonna have to see.
Pacheco is able to play this week. I think he's kind of that energy spark plug guy that I think we need to run our offense through right now. And I will give Mr. Edwards-Helaire a little bit of credit here in the last couple of weeks. He has played probably his best football in the last 2 years. I think probably in the last 3 weeks.
I wouldn't even say probably. Clyde. I'm like, who the hell? I
didn't realize that McKinnon's injury was that big to where he needed to go on IR. But CEH he's picked up the slack. He's played some good football. He's made some key plays. He's come up clutch in a couple of spots. So I'll give that dude credit for as much as I've bagged on him in the past.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, no, I agree. It's been big to see some players, to see him play with some spark and to play with, I think he's just looked more athletic, and with one of his plays, he was dragging guys. It was impressive. So hopefully they can capture that and come up with a good, rotation there and be willing to go to that when the passing game isn't working.
Yep, we're just got to put together a clean game of football, I'd say this year is about like a 25% chance of that happening in any given Sunday for the Chiefs. But there's still, hey, that's still a chance. There is still a chance. So, it's going to be an interesting end to the season. Thank you all, obviously, for tuning in and joining us this entire year. We've got a lot more coming for you. We're not going to fully dive into the offseason mode yet, but we're getting pretty close to it. Bowl games and college football bowl games are finishing up. So there will be some prospects to talk about on Kingdom Recon, where you can find Tom, Randy, and Josh talking about prospects that may or may not relate to the Chiefs, although probably a lot of Chiefs talk. We're going to
get a little bit more Chiefs heavy, I think, as we get a little bit closer here. But
so that'll be a good time. Be sure to tune in to the Kingdom Says YouTube channel. We're going to work on getting them some podcast streams going too and whatnot, so you can listen to them on multiple platforms. But that is where you can find them. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Kingdom Says Pod. Go over to our YouTube, subscribe, like, review, all that good stuff. And that is about all we've got for you, fellas. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I got to keep the faith. I'm not giving up on this season because, like, Tom mentioned at the beginning of the show, like, you just need to win 1, 2, put something together, go on a little bit of run. I think it's going to be really interesting here in the next couple of weeks with our last 2 games on where we kind of end up with the seeding. Maybe we end up in that 2 seed right now. If we stay at the 3 seed, it looks like we're going to have Buffalo coming to town, which I'm not too crazy about Buffalo. I mean, it's always a game regardless, and it can go either way. I'd rather see us move up and end up playing, Cleveland and the Fighting Joe Flacco's, even though Flacco is looking better than he has in the last 15 years as a pro. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, right. We'll see. Hold on.
We will see. We will see about the playoffs. So, yep, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in and listening once again. And we will see you guys on the next episode of The Kingdom Says.